Hello and welcome back to TVP World. My name is Alex Smolinsky and these are World Talks. Now, this year marks the 45th anniversary of the historic August Agreements signed in Poland in 1980. These landmark accords between the Polish government and the striking workers at the Gdańsk Shipyard were pivotal in shaping Poland's path towards democracy and ultimately contributed to the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. Today, we reflect on the significance of these agreements and their enduring legacy on Polish society and global history. And for that, joining us, we have Przemysław Gasztold, political scientist from the War Studies University. Good morning and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So now, how big of a milestone were these August agreements in the context of Poland's history and the broader struggle for freedom in Eastern Europe?
Yes, today we commemorate the August Agreements, one of the most important milestones in the modern Polish history. But when we say August Agreements, in fact, we have to remember that there were 4 of them in total, not only one. The first one was signed in Szczecin in the 30th of August 1980. On the following day, we've got the most famous, those recognizable, the Gdańsk Agreements. And there were also 2 more, which in fact were signed in September in Dąbrowa Górnicza and Jastrzębie-Zdrój. So what makes this agreement extraordinary? It's not only the moment of signing, but above all the vision and determination of workers who stood united and in solidarity. So what's here important is also the fact that the Inter-Enterprise Strike Committee had formulated 21 demands. And the first one was the most powerful. It was the demand to create, design and build the independent trade unions. So the structure which would be not subordinated and controlled by the authorities, by the Polish United Workers' Party. The other demands were about the right to strike, a very also important one, and also the access to the media. So the workers wanted to have also their own media outlets because they knew that everything was controlled and the censorship didn't allow them to say the truth. So the other also were about securing financial security to workers. So what's happened later is that after signing these agreements on 17th of September 1980, the Independent Self-Governing Trade Union Solidarity was formed, was established, and later in November, of course, with some problems from the government, it was finally registered. And it was the very important moment because we would be in a different moment of history. The Poland would not be the same the country as it is now without the August Agreements, without the birth of solidarity, and without those 16 months of freedom which allowed people to be together and challenge the communist repressive regime. So that was very important. And it was, in fact, the beginning of the end of the communist system. Because when we look at the August Agreements, we can say that, of course, after 16 months, the government had to rely to force to quell the solidarity by implementing the martial law. It was a battle lost by the solidarity, but in the final count, the war was over because the spirit of August Agreement endured within the society, and later, within a couple of months, it led also to, in a couple of years, it also led to the transformation. So what was also important in this event is that the Polish United Workers' Party lost its credibility and allowed to structure the trade union to function within the system. And it was a powerful message which was sent across the globe that within the country which officially relied on the dictatorship of the proletariat, the workers actually didn't want to have anything with the government. They didn't trust the government. They knew that the government isn't there for fighting for the rights. So they wanted to organize themselves, and that also was inspiring for many social movements, political parties in different countries abroad.
And so I wanted to ask, what were the living conditions for normal Poles during that time? And what was it that they had had enough of? And there was no, going back in terms of stopping these mass workers' strikes and protests that were happening then?
These were actually the results of establishing the solidarity. So when we trace the roots of this massive social movement, actually the largest social movement in the Polish history, we have to think about economic conditions, about the political situation, and also by other factors. And I will start with the most important one. It was the economy. I mean, when we look at the 70s, we have in power Edward Gierek, the first secretary of the Polish United Workers' Party, who had a vision of modernizing the economy through the Western loans. But it failed. It failed, and it had a devastating effect on the economy. And what the government wanted to do, they wanted to shift the burden onto the people. There was no hard currency. The government had to face rising external debts, and they wanted that the ordinary people will pay for this failed economic policy. Moreover, at that moment, the social moods were very bad. In terms of people had very negative prospect about the future. So they didn't expect that their situation will be better in the near future. And that also contributed to the unrest. There were also other factors, especially the opposition groups, which started to be more organized in the second half of the 70s. And this road to freedom began actually with those people who were few in number, but were great in spirit and in courage. And what they did, and I'm thinking about the Workers' Defense Committee, I'm thinking about the Confederation of Independent Poland, they encouraged people to say the truth. They planted the seed of activity that people can resist the oppressive system, even if they are repressed, harassed, arrested, and so on. It was a very important influence on the perception of whether we can do something to change our situation. And actually, from these modest circles of activists of the free trade unions of the coast came the strike at the Gdańsk Shipyard. Moreover, they were engaged in clandestine publishing, so-called So their activities, which were labeled by the government as anti-socialist, were very, very important to contribute to this situation which happened in 1970. Moreover, I can also add one factor which was religious. Actually, in 1979, John Paul II, the Polish Pope, came to Warsaw. It was his first visit in the country, and what he said that let your spirit descend and renew the face of the earth, the face of this land. And when the Poles gathered to hear him, they realized one truth, that the strength is in unity. They count themselves, they see that millions of them attended the meetings with the Pope. So in the face of policy of the government which repressed the Catholic Church, it was very important that millions of Poles actually were still, believing in Catholic religion, and it was also encouraging for them to be active. So everything happened, of course, on the 1st July 1970, and it was the economic decision that the prices of meat and meat products should be risen. And the government did that. And what happened? This decision sparked a spontaneous protest in different cities. Some of them lasted only a couple of hours, some were longer. It was in July, most of them centered around the Lublin region. And then the government wanted to have some kind of agreements separately with striking committees, and they were saying, the government, that they will meet the demands of the workers. And at the beginning, actually, this policy was to some extent successful. However, the strikes spread like wildfire through the whole country. century, it was impossible for the government to tame or to repress the workers, because when
And if I may just jump in here, how did the international community respond to these events surrounding the August agreements?
It was a surprise for international community, especially when we think about the Western countries, because there was the belief that the government would do everything possible to quell at the beginning this kind of unrest. So they would not allow the trade union to function. So it was a great success, a miracle, one would say, that actually the authoritarian or post-totalitarian state allowed the trade union independent, which were not controlled by the party, to function within the political system. And it was something new. It was something nobody expected it would happen. Of course, when we think about our eastern neighbors, countries from the Soviet bloc, they were afraid that this disease, the solidarity, will spread and will also inflict the unrest at their backyard. So GDR, Czechoslovakia, and especially the Soviet Union, they put a lot of pressure, firstly on the First Secretary Kania and then on Jaruzelski, to quell and liquidate the solidarity. So it was economic, political, social pressure that they wanted this trade union to be liquidated, people arrested, and everything should back as it was before August agreements.
And what about, so now looking back, what lessons can contemporary social movements learn from the success of these negotiations?
When we think about solidarity, its legacy, its heritage, I think that here we can point to the freedom, because it was the first independent trade union within the communist bloc, which actually, whose actions, whose policy was not reflecting only the trade union. In fact, the Solidarity had around 10 million Poles members, so it was 1/3 of Poles who joined this movement. And it plays different roles as a political force, social movement, organization which united people from different social backgrounds. There were people from socialists to nationalists, people who were close to the church, different churches, and so on. So freedom, I think that's very important, that when we are together, when we are united, when we rely to dialogue, to mutual respect, we can achieve everything, and we can face greater challenges, greater threats like the communist system. But also, when we look at the solidarity, we can see that it was also a powerful moral stance. The struggle for human dignity, the refusal to accept injustice, the struggle for human rights. Solidarity mixed and blended all those factors. And what we can do now is just to remember about those heritage with all those political tensions within our society and in the politics. We owe the founders of the Solidarity this heritage, and we should carry this.
And with that message, we're going to have to leave it right there. Przemysław Gasztold, political scientist, War Studies University, thank you very much for helping us understand this more in detail here today.
Thank you.
And with that, it's a wrap for this edition of World Talks. But as always, do stay tuned to TVP World for more breaking news, updates, and commentary.